In January 2024, in the ruins of an abandoned commercial building in downtown Springfield, Illinois, a janitor named Nicole Brown was supervising the final cleanup before demolition when she found something hidden behind a false wall that would forever change the understanding of one of the most disturbing missing person cases in American journalism history. For 11 years, the Williams family, fellow journalists, and federal investigators had wondered what had happened to Jessica Williams, an investigative reporter who disappeared just 1 hour before publishing an explosive exposé about municipal corruption that would have destroyed political careers and sent powerful people to prison. For more than a decade, they searched for answers about the fate of a woman who had dedicated her life to exposing the truth, no matter how dangerous that truth might be. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to not miss our upcoming cases. Today we will unravel a mystery that shook the foundations of press freedom and demonstrated how far powerful people are willing to go to silence those who threaten to expose their crimes. This is the story of a courageous journalist who paid the ultimate price for doing her job, of an investigation that involved federal agencies for more than a decade, and of how sometimes the truth remains buried for years until someone has the courage to dig deep enough to find it. Prepare to learn all the details of a discovery that finally brought justice after 11 years of forced silence. Jessica Williams was 34 years old in March 2012, but already carried on her shoulders the experience and reputation of a veteran journalist who had spent more than a decade unraveling the darkest secrets of American politics. With her red hair always pulled back in a practical bun, and her blue eyes that seemed to capture every lie and inconsistency that crossed her path, Jessica was both respected and feared in Springfield's political community. Her height of 1 meter and 70 centimeters and confident posture reflected a personality that never backed down from confrontations, especially when the truth was at stake. Jessica always wore professional dark suits. Navy blue was her favorite color, and carried a brown leather briefcase that had belonged to her journalist grandfather. Her hands were constantly stained with ink, the result of endless hours taking notes by hand, a habit she maintained even in the digital age because she believed that writing by hand helped her process information more deeply. Jessica's passion for investigative journalism had begun at 16 years old, when she discovered that the mayor of her hometown was embezzling school lunch funds. Her investigation as a high school student, published in the school newspaper, eventually led to the mayor's arrest and planted the seed of a career dedicated to exposing corruption. From that day, I knew that my purpose in life was to be the voice of those who couldn't speak for themselves, she wrote in her personal diary years later. Jessica graduated magna cum laude in journalism from Northwestern University in 2000, where she specialized in investigative journalism and constitutional law. During her university years, she interned at the Chicago Tribune and the Washington Post, impressing senior editors with her tireless work ethic and her ability to make reluctant sources share sensitive information. Jessica had a natural gift for making people trust her, said Margaret Davis, her editor at the Tribune. She could convince even the most cautious politicians to speak because they knew she would report their words with accuracy and proper context. In 2002, Jessica was hired by the Springfield Herald-Tribune as a junior reporter covering local politics. During her first 5 years, she developed a reputation for thoroughness and impartiality that distinguished her from her colleagues. Jessica never published a story without at least 3 independent sources confirming each fact, and she often spent weeks verifying details that other reporters would consider minor. The work that established Jessica as a formidable force in investigative journalism was her 2007 exposé of a fraudulent bidding scheme at Springfield City Hall. For 8 months, she tracked obscure public documents, interviewed dozens of sources, and meticulously built a case that revealed how municipal construction contracts were being directed to specific companies in exchange for bribes. The series of articles resulted in 15 arrests, including 2 city councilors and the public works director. Jessica wasn't just a reporter. She was a detective, said Robert Chen, editor-in-chief of the Herald Tribune from 2005 to 2015. She had a unique ability to see patterns where others saw only coincidences, and she never stopped investigating until she had all the pieces of the puzzle. Corrupt politicians learned to fear the name Jessica Williams. In her personal life, Jessica was known for her fierce loyalty to friends and family. She lived alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in Springfield's historic downtown, but maintained close relationships with newsroom colleagues and regularly attended Sunday dinners at her younger sister Amanda Williams Thompson's house. Jessica had been dating Dr. Michael Roberts, an emergency room physician, for 3 years, and they had begun seriously discussing marriage in early 2012. Jessica was one of the most principled people I ever met, Michael remembered years later. She literally couldn't lie, even about small and irrelevant things. If she forgot to water the plants, she would confess as if she had committed a crime. That total honesty was both her greatest strength and her greatest vulnerability. Jessica had a rigorous ritual for her most complex investigations. She kept physical files organized in coded boxes in a special closet in her apartment, always with digital copies stored in at least 3 different locations. She firmly believed that government transparency was the foundation of democracy, and frequently quoted a phrase by Edward R. Murrow that she kept taped to her monitor. The difficulty is that you cannot editorialize and remain honest. On weekends, when she wasn't working on investigations, Jessica volunteered as a writing tutor for low-income high school students. She believed that teaching young people to think critically and express themselves clearly was a natural extension of her journalistic work. If more people knew how to question authority and demand evidence, she told her students, we would have much less corruption in the world. Jessica was also an avid runner, waking up every day at 5:30 in the morning for an 8-kilometer run through Springfield's streets. This routine not only maintained her physical fitness, but also gave her time to process information and organize her thoughts before starting each workday. Many of her best ideas for investigations came during these solitary morning runs. What made Jessica truly special as a journalist was her ability to humanize complex stories of political corruption. She never forgot that behind each scandal there were real people being harmed, families losing homes due to unnecessary tax increases, children receiving inadequate education because school funds were being diverted, communities losing essential services because contracts were being overcharged. It was this dedicated, courageous woman, absolutely committed to the truth, who on the afternoon of March 14, 2012, was putting the finishing touches on the most important investigation of her career. An exposé that would reveal corruption at levels that shocked even her, who thought she had seen everything in 10 years covering Springfield politics. Jessica Williams was about to discover that some truths are too dangerous to be told, and that powerful people will do anything to keep their secrets buried. The morning of March 14, 2012 dawned with a thick fog that enveloped Springfield like an ominous omen of what was to come. The temperature was 4 degrees Celsius at 7 o'clock in the morning, with high humidity that made the air feel colder than it actually was. For Jessica Williams, however, the somber weather only reflected the gravity of the story she was about to publish. an expose that would reveal government corruption on a scale she had never imagined possible. Jessica had arrived at the Springfield Herald-Tribune newsroom at 6:45 in the morning, 45 minutes before her usual time, carrying a box of files that represented 8 months of meticulous investigation. The story she was finalizing involved a corruption scheme that connected Mayor Carl Davidson, 3 city councilors, the police chief, and a network of contractors who had conspired to embezzle more than $12 million in public contracts over 5 years. She was visibly tense that morning, remembered Patricia Johnson, assistant editor who arrived shortly after Jessica. Normally, she greeted everyone with her characteristic smile, but that day she barely nodded and went straight to her desk. I could sense that something big was happening. During the first 6 hours of the day, Jessica worked intensively on the final version of her investigation, fact-checking one last time and ensuring that every legal aspect had been reviewed by the newspaper's legal department. The article, titled "Web of Corruption: How Springfield's Elite Stole Millions," was 4,500 words and included photographed documents, transcripts of secret recordings, and statements from 3 witnesses who had agreed to speak publicly. At 1:30 in the afternoon, Jessica participated in a final meeting with Robert Chen, editor-in-chief, and Sarah Martinez, the newspaper's lawyer. For 90 minutes, they reviewed every allegation, every source, and every legal implication of the publication. Jessica had built an irrefutable case, Chen recalled. She had solid documentation for every claim, multiple sources confirming every fact, and even audio recordings of compromising conversations. It was investigative journalism at its best. The decision was made to publish the story in the online edition at 8 o'clock that night, followed by the print edition the next morning. Jessica would be the first to face the inevitable attempts at refutation and attacks that would come from powerful politicians, but she was prepared and eager to defend her work. "This is why I became a journalist," she told Chen at the end of the meeting. "People need to know how their elected representatives are betraying them." At 3 o'clock, Jessica called Dr. Michael Roberts to cancel their dinner plans for that evening. "Honey, I'm going to have to work late today," she said, her voice laden with anxiety and adrenaline. "The story is going to be published tonight, and I need to be prepared for the chaos that will follow. We can have dinner tomorrow to celebrate." Michael remembers this conversation as the last time he heard Jessica's voice, and the words, "celebrate tomorrow," haunt him to this day. During the following 3 hours, Jessica made meticulous preparations for the publication. She organized all source documents in chronological order, prepared anticipated responses to possible questions, and even drafted press releases to send to state and national media outlets. She knew that a story of this magnitude would attract attention far beyond Springfield. At 6:30 in the evening, Jessica received a phone call at her desk that lasted exactly 4 minutes. Colleagues who were nearby noticed that she became visibly pale during the conversation and wrote something on a piece of paper that subsequently disappeared. "She looked shocked and a little scared," said Kevin Anderson, sports reporter who sat at the adjacent desk. When she hung up the phone, she stared at the paper for a long time before putting it in her purse. At 7 o'clock, Jessica made her last recorded communication, a call to Robert Chen informing him that she needed to quickly verify additional information she had. Received. "Bob, I just received a tip that could make the story even bigger," she said, with evident excitement in her voice. "Someone wants to meet me with documents that could prove federal involvement in the scheme. I'm going to meet with the source, and I'll be back in an hour to finalize the publication." Chen tried to dissuade her from meeting with an unverified source so close to publication, especially since it was getting dark, and the source had insisted on a meeting in an isolated location. But Jessica was determined. This could be the missing piece to make this story truly explosive, she argued. 1 hour, Bob. I'll be back at 8 o'clock sharp to hit the publish button. At 7:15, Jessica stored her files in her locked cabinet, grabbed her purse and coat, and said, "See you later," to the 5 colleagues who were still in the newsroom. She vaguely mentioned that she was going to meet an important source, but didn't reveal specific details about location or the person's identity. Kevin Anderson saw her leaving through the back parking lot and getting into her silver 2009 Honda Civic. The final meeting to approve publication was scheduled for 8 o'clock. At 8:15, when Jessica hadn't appeared or answered calls or messages, Robert Chen began to feel growing anxiety. Jessica had missed deadlines only twice in 10 years of career and never without prior communication. At 8:30, he called Dr. Michael Roberts asking if Jessica was with him. At 9 o'clock, when Jessica had missed the meeting by a full hour without any communication, Chen made the decision to postpone publication by 24 hours. He tried to locate Jessica through all possible contacts. Her cell phone went straight to voicemail. No one in her family had spoken with her, and a quick check of her apartment showed that she hadn't returned home. At 10:30 in the evening on March 14, 2012, Robert Chen made the call that would change everything. He contacted Springfield Police to report the disappearance of Jessica Williams. Detective Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, specialist in missing persons, was assigned to the case and arrived at the Herald Tribune newsroom at 11:15 to begin an investigation that would become one of the most complex and politically sensitive in the city's history. From the first moment, we knew this wasn't a common missing person case, Detective Rodriguez recalled years later. When an investigative journalist disappears hours before publishing an exposé about political corruption, you can't rule out the possibility that the disappearance is connected to her work. The first priority was to locate Jessica's Honda Civic. At 2:15 in the morning on March 15th, the vehicle was found parked at an abandoned shopping center 8 kilometers from downtown, exactly the type of isolated location that would be chosen for a clandestine meeting with a nervous source. The car was locked, with no signs of struggle, but Jessica's purse that colleagues had seen her carrying when she left the newsroom was missing. Initial forensic analysis of the vehicle revealed only Jessica's fingerprints and some fabric fibers on the driver's seat that couldn't be immediately identified. More significant was the discovery that Jessica's cell phone had been deliberately left in the glove compartment, a detail that suggested deliberate planning by whoever had organized the meeting. Detective Rodriguez quickly expanded the investigation to include analysis of Jessica's phone records from the last 48 hours. The 6:30 call at the newsroom had come from a public phone located just 2 blocks from the shopping center where her car was found. Whoever called Jessica knew exactly where they wanted her to go, Rodriguez concluded. This wasn't a spontaneous meeting. At 8 o'clock in the morning on March 15th, less than 12 hours after Jessica had been reported missing, the FBI was officially invited to participate in the investigation. Special Agent David Thompson, specialist in federal crimes related to political corruption, arrived from Chicago with a team of 6 investigators and advanced forensic equipment. When a journalist disappears while investigating corruption involving elected officials, it automatically becomes a matter of federal interest, Agent Thompson explained. Our immediate concern was to determine if Jessica's disappearance was related to her journalistic investigations and, if so, who might have motives to silence her. Analysis of Jessica's work computer revealed that she had made backups of all her investigation files in 3 different locations: an external drive in her apartment, a cloud storage service, and a vault at the local bank. More importantly, investigators discovered that someone had attempted to remotely access her computer at 9:45 in the evening on March 14th, just 2 hours and 45 minutes after she had left to meet her mysterious source. The invasion attempt was sophisticated and almost successful, said Marcus Davis, FBI cybercrime specialist. Whoever tried this had advanced technical knowledge and access to specialized software. It wasn't an amateur hacker. The invasion was blocked by the newspaper's security system, but the fact that it was attempted suggested that someone was desperate to access Jessica's work. During the first week of investigation, federal agents interviewed all 47 people mentioned in Jessica's investigation, including the politicians she was about to expose. Mayor Carl Davidson, 3 city councilors, and Police Chief Robert Wilson provided detailed alibis for the night of March 14th, although investigators noted obvious nervousness during the interrogations. They all seemed genuinely shocked by Jessica's disappearance, Agent Thompson observed, but it was also clear that they were relieved that the story hadn't been published. None of them asked questions about when she might be found or if her investigation would continue. Analysis of phone records for all potential suspects didn't reveal obvious communications related to the disappearance, but investigators noted that at least 6 people connected to the corruption scheme had exchanged frequent calls in the 24 hours before Jessica's disappearance. There was definitely coordination happening, said Agent Thompson. The key question was determining whether that coordination was related to the disappearance or just panic about the imminent exposure. Jessica's apartment was meticulously examined, revealing that she had taken extraordinary precautions to protect her work. In addition to digital backups, she kept physical copies of critical documents in a home safe and had even sent sealed packages to 3 trusted friends with instructions to open them only if something happened to her. Jessica clearly knew she was dealing with dangerous people, said Detective Rodriguez. The level of precautions she took suggests that she had received threats, or at least felt that her safety was at risk. Unfortunately, not even those precautions were enough to protect her. After 2 intensive weeks of investigation involving more than 40 federal and local agents, the search for Jessica Williams had produced many questions, but no definitive answers. Her story about municipal corruption was eventually published, posthumously by the Herald Tribune, leading to the arrests she had predicted, but Jessica remained missing. The case became a national symbol of the dangers faced by investigative journalists and generated debates about press freedom protection. But for everyone involved in the investigation, the central question remained terrifyingly simple. What had happened to Jessica Williams on that foggy March night, and who had been powerful enough to make her disappear without leaving a single trace? The years that followed Jessica Williams's disappearance were marked by a relentless campaign for justice that transformed her family, colleagues, and even strangers into passionate defenders of press freedom. For those who knew Jessica personally, the impossibility of finding any clue about her fate became an obsession that consumed their lives and redefined their careers. Dr. Michael Roberts never could accept that the woman he loved had simply disappeared. During the first 5 years after 2012, he financed private investigations, hired private detectives, and even consulted psychics in the desperate hope of finding any clue about Jessica's fate. "I knew she hadn't run away voluntarily," he explained to anyone who wanted to listen. Jessica would never abandon a story of that magnitude, and she definitely would never leave me without explanation. Michael spent more than $85,000 of his savings and sold his house to finance searches that extended across 6 states. He developed a theory that Jessica had been kidnapped and taken out of Illinois, possibly kept alive in some remote location to ensure that her story would never be expanded or updated. If they killed her immediately, there would always be the risk of other journalists continuing her investigation, he rationalized. Keeping her alive but silenced would be more strategic. The Williams family established the Jessica Williams Foundation for Press Freedom in 2014, 2 years after the disappearance. The organization raised more than $350,000 through donations from fellow journalists, civil rights activists, and citizens concerned about the growing intimidation of investigative reporters. Robert Williams, Jessica's father, dedicated his retirement entirely to the foundation, traveling the country speaking about the dangers faced by independent journalists. Jessica represented everything that is best in American journalism, Robert said during a National Press Freedom Conference in 2017. She paid the maximum price for doing her job with integrity and courage. If we can't protect journalists like Jessica, we lose one of the most important foundations of our democracy. The Springfield Herald-Tribune newsroom was deeply traumatized by Jessica's disappearance. Robert Chen, editor-in-chief, developed a form of guilt that he described as editorial survivor syndrome. "I should have insisted that she not go meet that source," he repeated constantly. "I was responsible for the safety of my team, and I failed to protect the best journalist who had ever worked with me." Chen implemented rigorous security protocols that included mandatory check-in systems for all reporters leaving to meet sources, especially during sensitive investigations. No journalist could meet with unverified sources without backup anymore, and all meetings had to be recorded with location and estimated return time. The federal investigation continued officially active for 5 years, but resources dedicated to the case gradually decreased as other priorities emerged. Agent David Thompson was reassigned to other cases in 2015, but he never forgot Jessica Williams. "She was the case that taught me that some people are too powerful to be touched by the traditional justice system," he reflected in 2020. Jessica discovered something so damaging that someone was willing to commit a federal crime to silence her. Theories about the disappearance evolved dramatically over the years. Initially, investigators focused on local politicians mentioned in Jessica's investigation. In 2015, when all these suspects had been exhaustively investigated and ruled out, focus turned to potential federal connections that Jessica might have discovered but not included in her final story. Dr. Patricia Martinez, organized crime specialist at the WTE, University of Chicago, developed a theory in 2018 that Jessica had inadvertently discovered connections between Springfield's local corruption and larger-scale criminal operations. "Municipal corruption rarely exists in isolation," Dr. Martinez explained. "It's frequently connected to larger networks of money laundering, drug trafficking, or other federal criminal activities." This theory gained credibility when, in 2019, a separate federal investigation revealed that several of the contractors mentioned in Jessica's investigation had connections with Chicago criminal organizations. Although these connections weren't explicitly included in Jessica's work, it was possible that she had discovered these links during her final research. The case gained renewed national attention in 2020, when it was featured in a Netflix documentary series titled "Silenced Journalists Who Disappeared." The episode about Jessica generated more than 2,000 new tips from viewers, including 43 alleged sightings in 15 different states. Each tip was meticulously investigated by a team of private detectives financed by the Williams family, but none led to concrete evidence. The national journalism community never forgot Jessica Williams. In 2021, she was posthumously inducted into the Freedom of the Press Foundation Hall of Fame. and an annual scholarship in her name was established at Northwestern University for students specializing in investigative journalism. Jessica became a symbol of journalistic courage, said Margaret Thompson, director of the journalism school. Students often ask me if it's worth taking the risks that Jessica took. My answer is always that democracy dies when journalists stop asking difficult questions. In 2022, 10 years after the disappearance, Jessica Williams was officially declared dead by an Illinois court. The decision was devastating for Michael Roberts and the Williams family, who had maintained hope during an entire decade. Legally, she is dead, said Amanda Williams Thompson, Jessica's sister. But without a body, without concrete evidence, part of us will always wonder if she is somewhere waiting for rescue. The political impact of the case was lasting and significant. 3 of the politicians exposed in Jessica's investigation were subsequently arrested in separate federal investigations, completely validating her journalistic work. Mayor Carl Davidson resigned from office in 2014 and was convicted of corruption in 2016. Jessica was right about everything, said federal prosecutor James Anderson during Davidson's trial. Her investigation was impeccable, and her conclusions were completely accurate. Nicole Brown had worked as a janitor in Springfield for 17 years, but had never found something that would change her life until the cold morning of January 15, 2024. At 48 years old, Nicole was known for her meticulousness and for her ability to find valuable items discarded during commercial building cleanups. That day, she was supervising the final cleanup of the Riverside building, a 4-story commercial complex that was being demolished to make way for a new residential development. The morning was freezing, with a temperature of -3 degrees Celsius and strong wind that made the work even more unpleasant. Nicole had arrived at the building at 7 o'clock in the morning to coordinate the removal of the last furniture and equipment before the demolition machines arrived the following week. The Riverside building had been abandoned for 3 years after its owner company went bankrupt, and small animals, vandalism, and natural deterioration had transformed the location into a dangerous and unstable structure. Nicole was working on the 2nd floor, removing wood panels, damaged by humidity, when she noticed that a particular section of the wall sounded hollow when tapped. After 17 years doing this work, you develop an instinct for hidden spaces, she explained later. There was something different about that wall that didn't seem natural. Using an iron bar, Nicole carefully began removing the panels from the suspicious wall. Behind the first layer of wood, she discovered an empty space approximately 1.2 meters wide by 2 meters high, clearly a modification made after the building's original construction. More intriguingly, the space wasn't empty. Partially hidden at the back of the secret compartment was a medium-sized suitcase, severely deteriorated after years in a humid environment, but still recognizable. Next to the suitcase, Nicole could see what appeared to be clothes, documents in plastic bags, and other personal objects carefully organized as if someone had tried to preserve them. My first thought was that someone had used this space to hide valuable things during the recession, Nicole remembered. But when I started examining the items more closely, I realized there was something much more serious happening. Among the visible objects, she could see what appeared to be an identification wallet and documents with a female name. With slightly trembling hands, Nicole carefully removed the wallet from the compartment. The identification document was damaged by humidity, but still legible enough to show the name Jessica Williams, and a photograph that, despite the damage, clearly showed a woman with red hair. Nicole recognized the name immediately. She had followed the disappearance case through local media for more than a decade. When I saw that name, I knew exactly what I had found, Nicole said. Jessica Williams was a legend in Springfield. Everyone knew the story of the courageous journalist who had disappeared trying to expose corruption. I never imagined that one day I would be the person to find her. Nicole immediately stopped handling the objects and called 911 using her cell phone. "I need to report a discovery related to a missing person case," she told the operator. "I found personal items that I believe belong to Jessica Williams, the journalist who disappeared in 2012. The response was quick and coordinated. The first police unit arrived at the location in 8 minutes. Detective Captain Sarah Johnson, who had taken over the position after Maria Rodriguez's retirement, coordinated the initial response. When we received the call about a discovery related to the Jessica Williams case, we immediately mobilized our complete forensic team, she explained. This case had haunted our department for more than a decade. The area was cordoned off as a crime scene at 9:45 in the morning. A specialized forensic team arrived at 11:30, followed by State Medical Examiner Dr. Marcus Davis and federal investigators who had worked on the original case. Dr. Davis took supervision of the meticulous excavation of the hidden compartment. Initial analysis revealed that the space had been specifically modified to serve as a hideout. Someone had installed basic ventilation, waterproof lining, and even improvised shelves to organize the stored items. "This wasn't a temporary hideout," Dr. Davis observed. "Someone planned to use this space for an extended period." Among the recovered items were Jessica's personal documents, including her driver's license, credit cards, and a notebook she used for personal notes. More significantly, investigators found documents related to the corruption investigation she was conducting, including copies of fraudulent contracts and transcripts of recorded conversations. The most shocking discovery came when Dr. Davis removed a metal box from the back of the compartment. Inside the box, preserved in plastic bags, were skeletal remains that preliminary analysis confirmed as to an adult woman compatible with Jessica Williams's age and physical structure. Based on the position of the remains and the absence of obvious trauma to the bones, it appears that Jessica was kept in this location for a period before dying of natural causes, possibly malnutrition or illness, Dr. Davis explained to the investigative team. The careful preservation of her belongings suggests that someone wanted to keep evidence organized, possibly as insurance or proof. Official confirmation that the remains belonged to Jessica Williams came through DNA analysis on January 22, 2024, 1 week after the initial discovery. Michael Roberts, now 52 years old and living in Colorado, was personally notified by federal investigators. "After 12 years of unanswered questions, I finally know where Jessica was," he said in an emotional statement. "Now I can begin the grieving process that was denied to me for more than a decade." The Williams family was informed the same day during a coordinated meeting in Oregon. Amanda Williams Thompson expressed a mixture of relief and anger. "We are grateful to finally have Jessica back, but furious because she was kept away from us for so long by people who wanted to silence the truth." The discovery instantly transformed the missing person case into an active homicide investigation. Detective Captain Johnson coordinated the formation of a federal task force that included the FBI, state prosecutors, and specialists in crimes related to political corruption. "After 11 years, we finally have physical evidence to work with," she said. "Now we can begin the process of holding those responsible for Jessica Williams's death accountable." The complete forensic analysis of Jessica Williams's remains and the evidence found in the Riverside building revealed a conspiracy more sinister and elaborate than any investigator had imagined. Dr. Marcus Davis worked for 6 weeks with a team of federal specialists to reconstruct Jessica's last months of life, using cutting-edge forensic technology and detailed analysis of all documents preserved in the hideout. Examination of the bones confirmed that Jessica had been kept alive for approximately 2 to 3 months after her disappearance, dying probably in June 2012. Analysis of the remains indicates progressive malnutrition and signs of prolonged physical stress, Dr. Davis explained in his final report. Jessica was kept in captivity, possibly chained, with limited access to sufficient food and water for basic survival. The most revealing discovery came from analysis of the documents preserved in the secret compartment. Among the papers was a diary that Jessica had kept during her captivity, written on pages torn from a notebook and using a pen that her captors allowed her to keep. The entries, dated from March to June 2012, revealed devastating details about her imprisonment and the people responsible. "They brought me here because I discovered something bigger than municipal corruption," Jessica had written in her first entry, dated March 16, 2012. The fraudulent contract scheme was just the tip of the iceberg. Springfield was being used as a money laundering center for Chicago criminal operations. When I tried to investigate deeper, I signed my death sentence. Subsequent entries revealed that Jessica was being held by at least 3 different people, including someone she identified as the politician, a reference that investigators later connected to Vincent Morrison, former Springfield city councilor who had been mentioned in her original investigation, but never fully investigated due to lack of direct evidence. DNA analysis of hair found in the compartment confirmed Morrison's presence at the location, as well as 2 other people, Thomas Brady, a local contractor with known connections to Chicago organized crime, and Maria Santos, an accountant who had worked for multiple companies mentioned in Jessica's investigation. Jessica discovered that the municipal corruption scheme was part of a much larger money laundering operation, explained Agent David Thompson, who was recalled to lead the new investigation. Overpriced city contracts were being used to clean millions of dollars in drug revenues and other federal criminal activities. When she began connecting these dots, she became a threat that couldn't be ignored. Jessica's final diary entries, written in June 2012, revealed that her captors originally planned to keep her alive indefinitely as insurance against future exposures. "They think that as long as I'm missing but possibly alive, other journalists will hesitate to continue my investigation," she had written. "But my health is deteriorating. I don't know how much longer I can hold on." The investigation revealed that Vincent Morrison had used his political position to facilitate the modification of the Riverside building, creating the secret compartment where Jessica was kept. Construction records show that Morrison had authorized security renovations in the building in February 2012, just 1 month before Jessica's disappearance, a temporal coincidence that didn't go unnoticed by investigators. Thomas Brady was arrested at his home in Chicago on February 3, 2024, facing charges of kidnapping, first-degree murder, and participation in criminal organization. During interrogation, Brady initially denied involvement, but confronted with DNA evidence and documentation found with Jessica, he eventually confessed his participation in the conspiracy. Jessica Williams was a threat to an operation that moved more than $50 million annually through Springfield, Brady said during his confession. Morrison told us she had documents that could destroy not only political careers, but expose connections with Chicago crime families. We couldn't allow that to happen. Maria Santos was found dead in her apartment in Phoenix, Arizona, on February 15, 2024, apparently by suicide. A letter left by her confessed her participation in Jessica's kidnapping and death, expressing remorse for the 11 years of hell that her actions had caused the Williams family. Jessica was innocent and courageous, Santos wrote. She deserved life, not death, for doing her job with integrity. Vincent Morrison, now 67 years old and suffering from early dementia, was deemed unfit for trial. However, evidence found in his house included detailed documents about the money laundering operation and even photographs of the secret compartment where Jessica was kept. Morrison was clearly the architect of the conspiracy, said Agent Thompson. He coordinated both the corruption scheme and the cover-up that cost Jessica's life. The discovery led to a massive federal investigation that resulted in 23 additional arrests related to the money laundering network that Jessica had discovered. Politicians, contractors, and even members of Chicago organized crime were indicted in an operation that prosecutors described as one of the most sophisticated corruption networks ever discovered in the American Midwest. Dr. Michael Roberts found a touching way to honor Jessica's memory. He established the Jessica Williams Center for Investigative Journalism, Safety, at Northwestern University, dedicated to developing safety protocols for investigative journalists working on dangerous stories. Jessica died because she didn't have adequate protection when she became a threat to powerful people, he said during the inauguration ceremony. No journalist should die for asking difficult questions. In April 2024, Jessica Williams was finally buried at Springfield Memorial Cemetery in a ceremony that attracted more than 1,200 people, including journalists from across the country, press freedom activists, and members of Congress. Her headstone simply says, Jessica Williams, 1978 to 2012. She died for the truth. The Riverside building was preserved as a historical landmark after its discovery, transformed into the Jessica Williams Memorial for Press Freedom. The compartment where she was kept became a somber but powerful memorial to the dangers faced by investigative journalists. This place represents both the worst of human nature and the best of American journalism, said Robert Chen during the dedication ceremony. The Williams family established an expanded foundation that provides funded security and protection training for investigative journalists working on stories that might put them in danger. Jessica paid the ultimate price for her courage, said Amanda Williams Thompson. We can honor her memory by ensuring that future journalists have the protections she didn't have. The Jessica Williams case remains as a powerful reminder that press freedom requires constant vigilance and active protection. Her original investigation about municipal corruption proved to be just the surface of a much broader criminal network, completely validating her journalistic persistence even at the cost of her own life. Thomas Brady was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole in September 2024. During his sentencing, he offered a final statement. Jessica Williams was a courageous woman who died defending principles that I never understood. Her work eventually exposed crimes that would have continued for decades if she hadn't had the courage to ask the right questions. After 11 years of agonizing mystery, Jessica Williams finally rests in peace, and her death brought justice not only for her, but for an entire community that had been victimized by systemic corruption. Her last written words, "The truth always finds a way," became a battle cry for investigative journalists throughout the country, reminding them that some stories are worth any risk to be told.